Welcome back to the Director's Garage. I am your host and resident idiot, Michael, who's attempting to vogue at the moment. Okay, we're going to be heading into a few weeks where, folks, the episodes are going to be a little bit less frequent. I'm going to be heading out on the road. I've got the family truckster gassed up at about $6 a gallon. What the heck is going on? And I'm going to be heading to Santa Barbara for the Santa Barbara International Film Festival. I've got a shoot in San Diego. I've got another one in Palm Springs. I'm going to be interviewing Don McLean. Remember Don McLean? He was the guy who brought us that 70s classic American Pie. Well, we're going to be checking in with him for my day gig, which is Entertainment Tonight. But we're also in the middle of awards season, which is a late award season this year thanks to COVID. We just had the Screen Actors Guild Awards. I'll share some photos of that while I tell you that we've got the Grammys coming up, the Critics' Choice Awards, the DGA Awards, and then at the end of all that, we've got the Oscars, and they're all coming week by week by week. And I'm going to be involved in most of them. These award shows are kind of the Super Bowl of the entertainment news world. We get a big ratings boost, and we spend a lot to produce our shows like our Oscar coverage. Now, running those red carpets is one of the things I do. These award shows, everyone gets dressed up in outfits that would buy you a good electrostatic rig, and the jewelry would finance a couple of HE-1s. I get 3 minutes with each star, and you got to keep the platform clear for the bigger name stars, and you try to get those folks to stay a little longer. It's kind of like multitasking with extreme focus for about 4 straight hours. And to do all of this, I have to prep for days in advance so that my 3 minutes with each star is filled with stuff that the show can use. And no, we're not going to be asking if they prefer dynamic drivers to planar magnetic. Don't even ask. So all of this eats up time for me to shoot, write, and edit this show. Now today, I'm writing, shooting, and editing a show about these. The Audeze Carbon. I'm going to be trying to explain what makes this headphone so special, at least to me. Part of this is going to sound a little bit nutty, but I'm here to share my experiences with you, and this is certainly one of them. And I will accept if no one shares my view of this headphone. Remember, I'm the dude that liked the HD820, a headphone that almost no one likes.
Hey!
So if that's the case, just call me crazy and move on. It's okay. But I gotta tell you, the night after I shot the unboxing, I was up till all hours of the night running tracks. Now, I have spent many nights since taking notes while listening to this headphone. And there are a few weeks of research here. I can comfortably say there is something different going on with this headphone that is unique and exciting. They reveal something in my favorite tracks that I don't hear in other headphones. I think I nail what it is in the conclusion of this video, and it's gonna be a little controversial, but all I can do is tell you and share with you what I'm hearing. And this headphone, in my experience, sounds remarkable. Now I'm going to kick this party off with Ergonomics, as usual. Audeze pretty much threw out the script when they designed this thing. They are nothing like any of their other past headphones. This is one of the most comfortable experiences you're ever going to have on your head. And in the unboxing video, I liken the experience to the Meze Empyrean, and I stand by that characterization many weeks later. The one thing that I will add is that this is not exactly a featherweight. It's like 470 grams-ish, which is heavier than the LCD5 and it's heavier than the Susvara. But these things are so comfortable on the head. It's like, oh, you just don't want to take them off. There are about 3 headphones in the world I would put in the same category as these, which is the original Meze Empyrean, the original HD800, and these. They are the softest, most elegant feeling thing you're ever going to put on your head. They have cushy lambskin pads. They feel luxurious in your hands. Lambskin was a brilliant choice because they allow for a little bit of breathability and they keep your ears from heating up the way they do with the stacks. Still, things stay a little bit on the toasty side, but not to the point of ear sweat, which is disgusting.
Oh, gross.
The construction, solid metal, carbon fiber on the bands, and leather everywhere. And they share the same band as the LCD5, just with very different results. Now the cable is just okay, and you don't have much of a choice there. These things are not detachable, and I'm not about to try at this price point. Thankfully, it's plenty long, there's a very deep Y, and it's joined with this satisfying and weighty Audeze splitter. Now there is one elephant in the room here, and it's a biggie, and it may be a deal breaker for some folks, and you saw it at the end of the sound impression section of the first video. It's called driver flex. Some people call these stacks farts. I swear to God, look it up, it's a thing. If you move your head too quickly, or if you get them near a magnetic field, or if you change the pressure on your ear, the diaphragm, which carries a charge, it can move between the two powered stators and actually short out, even stick to one of the stators, and it creates a harsh noise that's like a cross between plugging a guitar into a live amp crossed with a tone arm needle being dragged across the surface of a record. Now, Stax headphones are notorious for driver flex, but the Carbon adds a new party trick of extreme volume as it does this. Move these while playing music and you will get a sonic jolt, a blast of sound that is a nasty surprise. Volume down anytime you want to adjust them or you risk this rather unpleasant effect. It's brutal, I swear to you. If you have sensitive hearing, this could be the one thing that keeps you from this headphone. Even with the volume down, you still get a little bit of it, but with music playing, yikes. They are tricky to remove without generating some sort of unpleasant effect, and I find myself being very gentle with these when I take them off, not because they're fragile, but because I don't want to get this blast of noise. It's even mentioned in the user manual video from Audeze. This is the worst part of this headphone and this review, and I can see this being the one feature that keeps people from buying them. Well, that and the concept of a dedicated Energizer on top of the price of the headphone. Now, since I had my little listening party, I've done some reading, and there are dozens of opinions out there about this headphone all over the place. And these different experiences suggest to me that the Carbon is apparently quite amp dependent. The Blue Hawaii is the combo that most folks seem to favor, and I'm not surprised given my own experience with them. In fairness, this is the only Energizer I own, and I can't vouch for other Energizers and other people's experiences. And I'm not going to be doing any Energizer shootouts, don't even ask. On other Energizers, the Carbon can apparently be less impressive. And the Blue Hawaii is a little bit underpowered for this headphone. I can open up the volume pot wide on quieter tracks. But here's one truth that shows up consistently. The Carbon gets better the more volume you put to them. At lower power levels, they can sound a bit ordinary. The tone thins out. But once you put the power down and really give it the beans, it's special. Really special. The bass increases in quantity exponentially as the volume rises. I'd also note that the Blue Hawaii needs a lot of time to warm up, much more than my Woo audio tube gear, like up to half an hour before the sound really settles in and starts delivering its best tone. Normally I would call these kinds of claims hogwash, but I've heard it, it's undeniable. The longer this amp is on, the better it sounds. If I power it up, get it out of standby mode, and just start listening right away, it's kind of meh out of the gate. But once everything is optimal, buckle up, this ride gets quite interesting. Now, one other point I want to make, and that's that I can't call myself an authority on E-Stat headphones. I've owned the Stax SR009S, and that's it. And I've read a lot of material suggesting that the Carbon is the least E-Stat sounding of all the E-Stat headphones. Whatever the hell that means. And that may be, but all I can tell you is that the Stax 009S sounded thin compared to the Carbon. The Stax is supremely detailed, but there's no weight to the sound of the 009S. And I prefer the sound of a good planer, even the Focal Utopia dynamic driver over the SR009S. And that alone may make some people shy away from this review. That's okay. We all like different sounds. But I would suggest that anyone complaining about a lean bass on the Carbon is probably listening at a low or a medium volume. So it's time to start breaking down the impressive sound of this Carbon. And the star of the show here is detail. It stands blow for blow with Audeze's own LCD5, which is pretty much the highest praise I can heap on any headphone. Supremely detailed. I think these are even faster than the 5. I put on Giles Martin's remix of Sgt. Pepper. We're going to be doing a little more Beatles today, and I'm going to refer to them throughout this video, but I was pulling more nuance out of the crowd noises on the title track than I've ever before heard, or at least never paid attention to it. There's detail up and down the frequency range and everywhere in between. Every echo, refraction, and pluck and note is distinct and precise. Picks on electric guitar strings, not just acoustic. Breaths on horns. If you love detail, this headphone will give you every bit until your cup runneth over. It's Stax-like in its detail, though I do believe that the SR009S is just a tiny bit more detailed than this, maybe by a hair. And really, at this level of detail, it's probably insignificant. A little help from my friends. Paul's bass has an entire new dimension to it. It's part detail, but there's something more going on here because paired with the Blue Hawaii, there's a force behind all of this detail. It's thick with detail. That's my best way of describing it. Now here I'm going to have to kind of make up a category because no other headphone I've heard has this sonic characteristic. When you listen to a highly detailed set like the 009S, the sound is generally thin. The detail dances and sparkles on top of the music. It's kind of euphoric, and a lot of people are drawn to this effect for good reason. But the detail to me sounds kind of detached in a way. In the Carbon, the detail is a part of the force of the wave. Like the sonic wave is coming at you with its force, and the detail is baked into the wave. Here's an analogy you'll only hear from your resident idiot. When you get hit by a tree trunk, you feel like you got clobbered by a heavy piece of wood. When you get hit with the Carbon, the wallop of the trunk is accompanied by every groove and crack and crevice in the bark of the trunk. It's thick with detail. And I've never heard this on any other headphone. I know I'm sounding a little bit nuts, and I'm crazy, just look at this show, but there's something different sonically about this headphone. It's really cool. Now, I don't know if I'd characterize it as better than, say, a Susvara or an LCD or pick your headphone, but it is different and it's unique. And if you buy into it, it's tremendously exciting. It's like a new sonic texture, and it's a thrill to hear. Now, it may get old at some point, like a party trick, but it's most definitely different. And if you think I'm exaggerating, all I can tell you is to listen to Within You Without You. And the combination of the percussion and the tambura and the texture of the slap on the skin combined with the bending bass of the drum beneath, it's damn near holographic, yet you still get the full force and impact of the drum itself. Now, the image, I talked about this a lot in the What's in the Box episode. I think it's remarkable. I think these are fairly locked in, and at the same time, just like the LCD5, I think there's space in between the places where the instruments are coming from. And I find the image is a great balance between this and soundstage. I've read some folks complain about bleed in the image. I don't really hear that much in the Blue Hawaii, at least. I describe the image as a kind of a sonic painting. I was checking out the new Tears for Fears album, The Tipping Point. I showed you that in the last episode. And the way they paint with sound, there's a next level effect to the image. And then when it comes to soundstage, I don't think this is the widest experience I've ever had in a headphone. An open back like the Abyss, to my ears, goes much wider. But it's not a bad soundstage at all. It's actually quite nice. but it's not a standout feature of the headphone the way some of the other categories impress. Generally, when I talk about soundstage, I talk about a trade-off between imaging and soundstage, and these are an imaging headphone first to my ears, but they do leave a little of that image on the table, and I think the result is that the soundstage isn't quite as claustrophobic as you'd think. They ride a nice balance between the image and the soundstage. They just lean a little bit into that image side. Now, the dynamics on this headphone are a bit of a mix too. The Carbon is wicked fast, as any electrostatic headphone is, but there's definitely a lack of slam down low, that loose percussive sound when a bass note hits with solid authority. You don't get that concussive slap effect out of the Carbon, but you do get the bass, and the quiet to loud is definitely there. Tremendous dynamic range, but it's missing that crack on the back of the head party trick that you get out of a headphone like the Utopia or the Abyss. Yet it's loaded with sonic surprises when things go from quiet to loud and back. And I want to talk instrumentation or realism for a second. And this is going to kind of surprise you. I don't find the Carbon to be a terribly realistic headphone in the sense of a live instrument in the room. There's a presentation going on with this headphone that distracts from what a live instrument sounds like in person. With the Susvara, for instance, a flute can sound like you're standing right next to a flute. Like you want to turn your head and you expect to see a flute. You know, I don't get that realism out of the Carbon. Instruments sound more affected by what the Carbon is doing. There's too much energy happening, I think, that sort of distracts from realism, if that makes sense. Okay, it's been a pretty wild ride up to now, but we're now going to move into sound structure. I'm going to be talking about bass and mids and treble and what the heck. Let's do them in that order, by God.
Gosh!
It never gets old. Okay, starting with the bass. And prior to the Carbon, the biggest knock on electrostatic headphones is that they are decidedly bass light. They struggle to even produce a decent level of bass. And at lower volumes, this headphone will underwhelm you in the bass department. But at good volume, the first thing that's going to shock anyone who tries these on and knows their electrostatics is that they produce excellent, detailed bass with texture and thickness and even reasonable supply. This is an electrostatic headphone with good bass presence. Now, maybe it's the Blue Hawaii, maybe it's the DAC, I don't know. But the bass is significant, and I've even heard this headphone get bassy on some tracks. It's amazing what Audeze has been able to generate in the bass department on the Carbon. And there's detail and texture along with the quantity. If this had slam, it would be the best bass I've ever heard, but it does lack that fun, loose slam effect. Now on my favorite, say, Led Zeppelin tracks, I still do run to the Susvara, the Focal, or the Abyss, but I don't know if I've ever heard a bass with this much detail before, and it's alluring. One thing this headphone will not do is enhance the bass, but again, you got to push the volume in order to engage the bass. And I find myself listening to this headphone at excessive volumes because it sounds so great as the volume increases. It's kind of like a crazy hot bowl of succotash. You want to keep eating it as fast as you can to stay on top of the heat. But the second you stop eating, your tongue, or in this case, your ears, are going to let you know you've been overdoing it. Moving on to mids, and I really enjoyed the mids on this headphone. Female vocals, male vocals. I can see a case where someone might make a claim that this headphone goes a little bit harsh on the upper mids. I've had to ask myself on occasion are these going harsh, but the problem is that I play these things so darn loud. And I counter this by saying that I've never gone diving for the volume knob to turn them down when I hit a particularly bright passage. So I give these mids a good grade, though I can see a case where some might prefer a little bit of a softer curve across the mids. Female vocals are intimate, but I think male vocals outshine the ladies on the Carbon. Again, they favor anything with a little bit of weight behind it. Still, that breathy Diana Krall voice thingy, terrific mids. And then finally we get to the treble, because that's all that's left. And it's that holographic effect again. You get that sparkle and detail up top, but it's thick. It's a thick detail. And there isn't any one thing that calls attention to itself on this headphone. It's a great balance. Yes, there's sparkle up top, but it's not overdriving or calling attention to itself the way other headphones do. I was listening to some Bowie, and you get that extreme detail of the strumming pick on the acoustic guitar strings, but it's not jumping out at you. It's just like a nice highlight. And then you'll hear this little squeak from a chair in the corner of the room. You're like, whoa, where did that come from? The treble is not dominant. It's balanced, but with that crazy, crazy detail. Time for the music section. And today, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk Beatles, and I'm going to be talking about Pepper a little bit and some other tracks. Pepper was one of the wow experiences I had on the Carbon. I know there's a camp out there who shudders at the idea of the new mixes. This headphone is the best case I've ever heard for those Giles remixes. The way he separated out and expanded the image and soundstage of Pepper plays right into the strengths of the Carbon. It was a new presentation of this landmark album for me. And I wouldn't use the word reference because the Carbon is out of reference. It's something else. It's presenting music in a unique way. It's an experience more than anything. Now, moving on to Magical Mystery Tour and I Am the Walrus. Now, folks, this is a track I've literally heard thousands of times. Thousands! It's one of my very favorite Beatle tracks, and on the Carbon, this song builds, and it starts playing with phasing, and this wrapping effect it has around your head is so different from the way I've heard this track before. And when you experience a piece of music that you've heard this many times, and you get a completely new angle on it, it's phenomenal. And I'm talking about the original stereo mix, not some new remix. On Strawberry Fields, the bass and guitars have this really interesting depth, particularly on the first section before the edit. That part stood out for me in a fresh way. On Abbey Road, the sound is so dense. Come Together has so much coming at you. Between the deep bass runs and Ringo's bass drum, the bottom on that song is spectacular. I keep returning to the way this headphone reproduces Ringo's, Tom's, and bass drum with fantastic detail. Then you get the guitar bends on top of it. It's spectacular. Now, Something is gorgeous, maybe my favorite track on Abbey. I think it's George's greatest work. The strings, Ringo's drums, Paul's beautiful bass dancing up and down the scale. If you're into classic rock, as I am, the Carbon Blue Hawaii combination does amazing things, as long as you're down for cranking it up a bit. All right, next up I'm going to talk about the Doors. And for 3 years, this band produced some of the best rock ever made. And I'm going to take you back to the summer your director was born, 1967, and the Doors' debut album. Now, this is the summer when Sgt. Pepper was released on the heels of the Strawberry Fields Forever Penny Lane double A-sided single. There were 3 albums released that summer by non-Beatles groups that changed the course of rock forever. And the first is Surrealistic Pillow by Jefferson Airplane. The second is Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced? And the third was the Doors' first album. And I'm going to talk about the start of side 2, a deep track, and their version of the Willie Dixon blues song Backdoor Man. Now, Robbie Krieger picks up an electric bass guitar for the track, and it's doubled by Manzarek on keys. The bass is thick and driving and sexy. This was one of those fantastic bass moments on the Carbon. If you think this headphone is going to be bass light, the first 10 seconds of Backdoor Man will disperse any fears you have. And it's not just like a bottom end. You pick up depth to the bass. It's thick. Manzarek's keys fill up the treble on the right, and Krieger's guitar fills are taunting. And it's one of Morrison's first real gritty vocals. The Susvara wows me with its confidence and presentation. It's one of the most complete headphones I've ever heard, and a true joy. The LCD5 redefines what reference can be for me. I've marveled at the LCD and how it presents music in its purest, most uncolored way. The Carbon touches something different, and here's the controversial part. The closest thing I can equate my experience with the Carbon to is my listening session with the HE1, and that's Sennheiser's $50,000 masterpiece. This delivers a similar experience, or at least it's in that territory. Now, to be fair, I only got one listening session with the HE1 a few years ago at Can Jam Los Angeles, so I don't have that recall being fresh in my head. But the HE1 wasn't what I would call an accurate experience. It wasn't like some sense of musical purity, like I'm connecting to the music or the musicians in the studio. The other headphones I mentioned give me a better sense of what was recorded in the room. The HE1 was about presentation and immersion and musical enjoyment. And one track that I heard, that I think everybody has heard on the HE1, is In the Ghetto by Elvis Presley. It's the test track that Sennheiser put in this short little stack that you got to listen to. So that's kind of a benchmark track. And when I first called it up on Roon, I thought, nope, this is a dumb comparison. It doesn't work. And then I looked and I was listening to the title version. And I went, oh. So I switched it over to the HD Tracks version, the 96 kilohertz that I downloaded. And you know what? That HE1 comparison holds some water. Both headphones are sort of like a great symphony. All of these components that I talk about in these shows, the sound structure and the sound properties, they join together for this rich, deep sea of sonic engagement. This headphone is an achievement and a landmark product. I can't say enough good things about it. And my only negative things to say about it is Stax farts. See how I can ruin an eloquent turn of phrase? That takes skill, kids. All right, step back, folks, because now I'm about to take these things down a notch or two, okay? Because that driver flex unpleasantness is really what will keep me from making these a daily driver around here. If I'm kicking around the office and doing a bunch of things and I want to play some music, the Carbon makes you sit still because of that driver flex. And that's not practical as I'm writing out checks, copying files, writing a report, or any of the other normal busy stuff I do around here. And then the other thing is volume. To get, as I mentioned, to get the most out of these, you really want to be cranking these things up. I'm not always in the mood for playing my music loud because it triggers my tinnitus. But for those times when I want an experience, man, I hope you all get to hear what I'm talking about. I don't know how much critical listening I'll do on these. There are better headphones for picking apart a recording. But for just pleasure, for listening to my favorite music, my best recorded tracks, for the sake of enjoyment, for getting lost in the music, this is the current headphone I'd choose. It's a headphone where someone might say, oh, I discovered this great new artist, and my thought is going to be great. I wonder how that sounds on the Carbon. It's a place you take your favorite music to enjoy it. Very much like going to your favorite club to hear an artist perform. So that's the Audeze Carbon, or if you're me, the Audeze Carbon. I'm sorry. Yeah, I showed extreme restraint not doing that for this entire episode. Now, $4,500 is a shit ton of money to pay for anything that doesn't need an oil change or a bathroom remodel. And then you add to that, you need a decent Energizer, and you're talking stratospheric kilobucks. But if you're after that last 10%, this is a cost-no-object headphone that may scratch that itch. It's got amazing detail, precise imaging, terrific tone, and a top-tier, comfortable design that, being honest, is a little bit on the heavy side. If you can get past the driver flex and you're willing to listen at crank that knob levels,
Crank that knob!
there's something special about this experience that you really can't get in any other headphone. So now I'm going to ask you to subscribe to the Director's Garage so you don't miss a thing, including our next episode. That's episode 100. And that means we're going to be doing some reflecting on our journey to the century mark. Things that I've learned, things that I'd have done different. It's been a wild ride, and there is still so much more to do. So give this episode a thumbs up if you enjoyed this deep, deep dive into the remarkable Carbon. If not, you can do the other thing. I can't say I blame you either way, but I will see you in episode 100.